Hello and welcome. It's Empire of the Cop Inside. I'm your host, Farrell Keeling. We've got the lovely Neil Jones here with us today again to dissect that rather mad business at the weekend. I'm going to start off with a positive before we move on to the inevitable negatives that are associated with that sort of loss against Tottenham. And the reality is, really, Neil, I think even when Liverpool go down to 9 men, you'd say Liverpool were on the balance of things, almost appeared to be the sort of better side. I think we leave that thinking, you know what? I think the mood is sort of almost bizarrely buoyant. We're all sort of very sort of proud of our lads on the pitch. We think, everyone really sort of didn't put much of a foot wrong. Even Matip, you have to argue, you're a bit unlucky, a bit tired for the goal. You can sort of see how as soon as we go down to 9 men, sort of the rationale for how we plan to sort of play out the game. You think probably players like Kanate and Nunez make it onto the pitch with 10, but it just completely changes the face of the game. I don't know. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think there are ways to lose a game, aren't there? And I think the way that Liverpool lost that game on Saturday was acceptable, understandable, and encouraging. I think they've had an encouraging start to the season, full stop. And I don't think losing that unbeaten record, losing that sort of unbeaten start, should take away from what's happened and what the development of this team has been over the last few months. And I completely agree with you. I thought defensively, considering the sort of, the narrative really is a little bit like, oh, Liverpool have still got some defensive issues. Well, I actually thought the way they defended was pretty outstanding for the most part. Against a good side away from home, with 10 men from the 26th minute, with 9 men from the 69th minute, to be the way that they were and to set up the way that they were, I think was a credit to the manager and to the players as well. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there was a couple of times, wasn't there, when they got a corner sort of late in the second half, and you were thinking they're not going to, are they? They're gonna go and score here, aren't they? And it was just one. It was just beyond them. It was a cruel blow. Listen, I saw a few people sort of. I thought Matip was probably the man of the match for Liverpool, along with Alisson and Van Dijk. Until obviously the last seconds of the game. But I don't think you can sort of put too much blame on him. It's a cross fist in, and I saw a few people saying, "Oh, you need to sort his feet out." And you think, yeah, okay, well, it's a 96 minutes of a game where you've been playing with a man down, you've been defending your box tirelessly for the most part, and clearing balls away and getting in the way, and being in the right position. These kind of things happen. I don't think it needs to be any blame put on Joel Matip or indeed any Liverpool player, maybe with the exception of Diogo Jota, who he's a bit unlucky to get 2 yellow cards, but the second yellow card is just a silly decision from the player, and that's ultimately, I think, that probably cost Liverpool a chance of really hanging on in that game and maybe even going on to win it as they did up at Newcastle.
I'm curious of where you stand on sort of the officiating, because there's so many sort of flashpoints within that game, and you can kind of say, look, the Diaz goal is absolutely ludicrous, should have stood on side. We've already been sort of made aware of the decision making that went on behind the scenes and the apparent sort of lack of proper communication between the man on the pitch and the men in Stockley Park. You can sympathise with Jones in that the contact that does occur it is not intentional. His foot rolls over the ball, but then I suppose you could see the other point where once you do see the contact, it's a difficult one. I think I heard on the Anfield Wrap that described it as almost an amber card.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, ultimately there could be no sort of sympathy in general for how the team at VAR handled affairs sort of generally on the pitch. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we leave the red cards are the red cards. I think you can make a case that both of them were red cards, even if you don't think that Jota's first one is a yellow. Okay, that those do get given as yellows, and he sort of got away with one just before it on Basuma, didn't he? Which probably should have been a yellow, in any case. And then once he's done that, I think the second is a second yellow. So I don't think you can argue that too much. I think Curtis is unlucky, but it probably is. I think it probably is a red card. So it's very, very unfortunate. He's not trying to do what it looks like he's doing on the still image. He's trying to protect the ball, and he's gone over the top. But you think, look, it's by the grace of God a little bit that Basuma doesn't pick up a really serious injury. So when that happens, I think you sort of have to accept that a red card's probably going to follow. I thought the general level of officiating in the game was pretty poor. I think there was a moment where Salah was penalised for a foul, which I didn't see at all down in the sort of near the Tottenham box, and that ended up getting booked for kicking the ball away. Then there was another one where I think Endo took one in the face. There was Allison getting booked late on for time wasting when Liverpool are playing with 9 men. You're thinking, come on, guys, like a bit of common sense here. There are mitigating circumstances. So I think it was it was a tense game, obviously, and there was a lot of flashpoints in it. But I think a lot of them were sort of ramped up by the match officials and the way that they handled it. And then, of course, the Diaz incident is just one of those that it needs explaining. I'm sure that we've seen Howard Webb and the PGMOL showing audio clips of the of what the officials are talking about. I think they need to do it with this one, because I don't think anyone can really understand how this decision has been made, A, so quickly, and B, obviously so incorrectly.
No, absolutely. Before we sort of touch, because I do want to talk about Liverpool's response to this specifically, their statement. I think there's also a sense of the club emerging from this and the players emerging from this and thinking it's very much almost us against them. You can sort of see it in Van Dijk's comments, Nunez's comments sort of after the game. There's this idea, I suppose, of this almost certainly galvanising Liverpool. You get the sense of Liverpool emerging from this, not thinking, it's the end of our beaten run. They're emerging from this thinking there's way more to come. I just wondered, do you take that view that this is galvanising Liverpool specifically as well, or is this worried that this attitude of sort of almost us versus them risks more problems with officials in future? Because not that the onus is on the players specifically to keep the peace, because you can understand how they're feeling certainly in the heat of the moment, but it's also as much on officials in Stockley Park and those, of course, on the pitch to deliver consistently competent performances. That should be the minimum of what we expect going into each game.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I think you've got to understand that the players, they've just given everything for 96 minutes, and I've had it taken away from them, through a moment of real misfortune with the own goal, but also, through then subsequently learning that, that goal that you scored in the first half actually should have counted, and, sorry about that. Well, in fact, they haven't even said sorry, which is probably another element to the equation. You also have to remember that some of those players, Virgil van Dijk, Alisson, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andy Robertson, Mo Salah, Jurgen Klopp, they have seen Liverpool miss out on the Premier League twice by a point or 2 points by one game. There was a year where they missed out by, what was it, 12 millimeters. That was the margin of Manchester City becoming champions and Liverpool not. So they're very much aware that at this stage of the season, it might say, oh yeah, it's the end of September, the start of October. Titles aren't won, but points are, and points are just as important at this stage of the season as they are in April and May. And I think that that's an element to it. I think there's also this kind of a little bit of a look. This is getting too bad now. There are too many of these events, and listen, Liverpool are not the only club affected by it. Liverpool's players are not the only players affected by it. We've seen this season Wolves denied, a deserved chance to get a result at Old Trafford. We've seen Brentford at Newcastle penalised for a dreadful penalty decision. We see these apologies coming, or these admissions of that was an incorrect application of the rule or whatever. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Sheffield United, wasn't it, at Aston Villa, with the goal line technology when it wasn't working. We had Liverpool last season at Arsenal when the camera didn't quite pick up. The camera didn't stretch up enough. Was it Martinelli for the first goal away at Arsenal last season? So I think there's a sort of a feeling among a lot of players and maybe a lot of managers and probably just a lot of people in football that, you know what, we've had a few years of VAR now, and what it was brought in to do, it isn't doing. It isn't alleviating these human errors. It isn't making things more transparent or more clear. The processes aren't as streamlined as we thought they would be. We thought, okay, yeah, for the first couple of years, we'll have some difficulties while they work it out, but it'll soon become this smooth process. It isn't. It isn't. I mean, I was speaking to a few couple of Everton fans. I played football myself yesterday, and I was speaking to some Everton fans who were at their game on Saturday. Said it took sort of 4 minutes, I think, for Dominic Calvert-Lewin's goal to be sort of deemed whether it was onside or not. And in
Jesus Christ.
the end, the actual conversation, and the guy I was speaking to actually is privy to the conversation because of his job, said the conversation said, look, we don't think it's onside, but we can't find an angle that shows that because the goalkeeper obviously was in the way, and there was no sort of thing. And you think, well, think about the fans in the stadium. Think about what they're doing. They're sitting there, sort of wondering what's going on, sort of waiting to kick off the players. It just is at the moment. I think there's just a bigger conversation to be had around VAR and the rule, the application of the rules, and the people who are applying them as well. And I know that there's a lot of conspiracy theorists in football and people who have histories with or referees who have histories with certain clubs, or clubs feel that they do. I think the wider issue is just the fact that I think the rules are a little bit sketchy and vague, and I think the way that they're applied is messy, and yeah, it doesn't benefit the game, in my opinion. I've thought that for some time. Never mind, just because of Saturday, I look at an offside goal can be disallowed for offside incorrectly when you just have a linesman and a referee. So okay, that can happen. Human error can happen, but VAR was meant to alleviate that, and it just doesn't.
That's the thing. I think if we're all sort of honest with ourselves, no referee is genuinely, wholeheartedly biased against Liverpool. But I suppose the problem is you see these decisions happening on such a consistent basis. It just adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it, when it comes to these sort of conspiracy theories, and you're getting, people wondering, well, what if? I mean, Liverpool's statement, of course, they acknowledged VAR, the acknowledgement of significant human error on VAR's part, and expressed an intention to explore the range of options available, given the clear need for escalation and resolution. But I mean, you mentioned, of course, about the sort of lack of an apology. It was an acknowledgement of error, but it wasn't sort of a direct apology to Liverpool that many feel was warranted. But what can Liverpool reasonably do in this situation? I mean, we can rule out, obviously, the game being replayed. We can rule out Diaz's goal being retrospectively awarded. What are our options here? Because surely the officials, surely Howard Webb, the organisation as a whole, needs to take a serious look at themselves and talk about consistency. Because you look at instances in the game alone. The failure to book, I think it was at Destiny Udogie for signalling for a card. Van der Ven's reckless tackle on Gomez, which, by the way, looks to me pretty much a carbon copy of Van Dijk's tackle. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so you look at these moments in the game and you think, well, hang on. A few games ago against Newcastle, Van Dijk got sent off for this. So you just think, well, what on earth? Where is the consistency here? Who's briefing you on how to respond to these instances? And if you haven't seen them on the pitch, why aren't the team at Stockley Park saying, hang on, let's pull the play back a bit here? We've just seen something, that in our rule book that we're going by the season on that doesn't track. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, I think when you go back to the question of what Liverpool can do, they can't do much except for keep the sort of the heat on, if you like. They can keep this in the forefront of the conversation, going forward, because it would be easy, and there are a few people who are trying to do it. And listen, I sort of half understand the logic of that, in terms of you don't want to turn things into a witch hunt. You don't want to sort of make it people who shouldn't be the center of the story the center of the story. But there's this idea that, oh well, look, they've held their hands up and just you move on. It's like, well, Liverpool are saying, well, actually, no, it's not that simple, because this isn't just about a point at Tottenham or 3 points at Tottenham or one disallowed goal. This is actually about trust in the entire process, isn't it? This is about, well, hang on. So you're telling me, I mean, this is I'm speaking as I'm Liverpool here. You're telling me there was 2 camera operators assisting VAR and a VAR, and all 4 of them were under the impression that the goal had been given, even though the camera operators I know for a fact, and we've seen it do it, will have zoned in and shown the linesman with his flag up. What did he not wonder why Luis Diaz wasn't celebrating? Did he not wonder why, the Tottenham were ready to take a kickoff from their own penalty area rather than a kickoff from the halfway line? How can 4 people in a room whose job it is to know these kind of things, how can they all believe that the referee's awarded the goal? And when they've done it, how can the referee, when he says check complete, how is there no process which says, okay, just to double check complete, he's offside, yeah? And if he does that, I'm pretty sure the fella down in England in the VAR says, no, he's onside, and then it's corrected. But there was no lines drawn. I thought the lines were drawn automatically, as in, or not automatically. Sorry, in every instance, I thought the lines were drawn. Whether he's 5 yards onside or 5 yards offside, they draw the lines just to say, well, there you go, there's your proof. They never did it. It was very quick. And I remember thinking at the time, I was watching it on TV. I didn't go to the game. I was watching it and thought, oh, I said, that looks tight. I said, I think he's onside. And then you go, I'll check complete. And you do sort of go, oh, well, he must be offside. That must just be a strange angle, or, they've got that. But then he never showed the lines. And you think, well, why has that happened? That doesn't happen very often at all. Then it emerges at half time that they've sort of realised it, and then a statement appears afterwards. And I think Liverpool's point is, if you want us to trust this process, tell us what the process was and be transparent about it. And I think that includes the audio. I think it includes the sort of timeline of what's happened there. I think it might include the conversation that they had with Jurgen Klopp, which I believe he was told at half time, or certain people at Liverpool were told at half time that a mistake had been made. So obviously the PGMOL knew, the match officials knew that they'd made the mistake. So I think that's what Liverpool's aim is really here. It's not a question of, listen, we want compensation, or we want points, or we want Darren England to be sacked, or we want anything like that. I think it's more just, no, we want to make sure now that this is a sort of an icebreaker, that we say, no, we're not going to just sort of accept these significant human errors. We actually want to know why did they keep happening? And what are you doing about them in terms of making sure that they don't happen anymore? And I'm pretty sure there will be some things now. There might be a minimum time put on a VAR check. It might be right. We don't do any VAR checks less than a minute, because we need to make sure we get the right decision. It might be there needs to be a change in the language that's used between the officials, and in the sense of check complete or intervention, whatever. We might have to tidy that up and make that. But I think that's what Liverpool are pushing for, rather than in personal compensation.
Perhaps even not maybe just as bizarre, certainly, but also the response to sort of Liverpool's statement on the matter from certain quarters is quite disappointing, I would say. I mean, Gary Neville, for example, just to pluck an example out of the air, tweeted after the match that he felt Liverpool's response was a mistake and that they should respect the apology given, which, as we said, acknowledges human error, but isn't really a direct sort of apology to Liverpool. I think Neville did admit it was a sort of snap reaction, and he could be wrong, to be fair to him. But I'm struggling. I'm struggling to see a world in which it's unreasonable for Liverpool to want to escalate the issue. I appreciate that's undefined as things currently stand, but I don't see why it's unreasonable for Liverpool to want to take the issue further and to not just blanketly accept an apology and move on. Especially, as we've rightly pointed, this isn't the technology hasn't been perfect. Not the technology. The use of the technology hasn't been perfect since it's been implemented, and it's not like we're talking about this is the first issue of the season. We've kind of gone, well, that's an anomaly there. There's all kinds of issues. I mean, even the fact that the VAR and I think the assistant VAR weren't they officiating in the Middle East. Yeah. Not only 2 days before the game, they had an 8-hour flight back, and the fourth official. Why? I'm struggling to understand why the response to it does. And again, it's the same thing when it comes down to sort of how officials officiate Liverpool games. I don't want it to be about it's because it's Liverpool, but it does. It's hard. It's almost hard to avoid that, especially when you're seeing the response to this, even from some high-ranking journalists. I think Adam Crafton put something to that effect. At the Athletics, Adam Crafton. I just think, well, why shouldn't Liverpool escalate this? If this was happening to Tottenham, I'd want Tottenham to escalate this for the good of the game, not just for the good of Liverpool, because that's ultimately the point here, isn't it? It's not that Liverpool,
Yeah, sorry, I think from the perspective of those defending the officials or wanting Liverpool to maybe not make as big a deal about it as some do, I think there's another element to play at the moment. There obviously is a serious problem with regards to the treatment of referees at grassroots level and up. And that has to be acknowledged in the sense that there are unacceptable treatments of officials. And a lot of that trickles down from the Premier League. So obviously it trickles down from fans, it trickles down from players, that they see players screaming at referees, or, fans on social media saying referees are biased or give home decisions or hate us, that they never give us a decision. And it all feeds in, and it manifests itself in this sort of misplaced aggression and passion on a Sunday league in an under-10s game or whatever. So there is that issue, clearly. There's also the issue that the Saudi Arabian league is is threatening to take officials away from the Premier League. That's been bubbling under for a few weeks. So there's the fear that, well, I know what we're going to do. You can't have a game without referees. And what if all our referees say, we know what, we've had enough of this. We're going to go and take the money in Saudi Arabia. We're going to go over there. And listen, we've just mentioned it there. Dad in England, Dan Cook, Michael Oliver were refereeing in the United Arab Emirates on Thursday, I think it was. So those things are already sort of starting to happen. That the referees are starting to branch out and leave. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from, in the sense of, like, let's not sort of, let's not burn everything to the ground here and have a situation where we've got a refereeing crisis because we don't have enough people who'll do it. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that, well, if I think there's a lot of people, and listen, there'll be some who don't, and I respect that opinion. But I think there's a lot of people who feel that things have to change in terms of, like you say, the implementation of VAR. Listen, if you ask me, I would get rid of VAR, but that's not happening. Let's take that off the table. That will not happen anytime soon. But there is a definite need for things to change, and whether it's language, like I say, whether it's processes, whether it's communication, whether it's transparency after the event. And we say, well, look, this is why a decision was reached. I know a lot of people use rugby as an example in terms of being able to hear referee conversations. There was that moment. I mean, I watched the Women's World Cup, obviously, and there was a bit of that, wasn't it, going on with the referee sort of announcing to the crowd why a penalty's been awarded, or sort of why the VAR have advised this decision. Maybe that will be something that can come out of it, but you can't get those kind of changes without a sort of a bit of pressure and applying a bit of pressure. That's where change comes from. It comes from sort of people, questioning, querying, being awkward, asking awkward questions, putting things at the forefront of the media. And for me, I think this is an incident, and it's not the only incident this season. I think the Onana one with Wolves was every bit as bad, in my opinion, as this. We had Liverpool have had a red card rescinded already this season. They had the player sent off, and it was rescinded on the Monday in Alexis McAllister. Other clubs have had penalties awarded, or red cards not awarded, or offsides and things like that they're not pleased about. There was one obviously recently, was it Fulham, with Manuel Akanji in front of the goalkeeper, which a goal should have been disallowed, wasn't disallowed. Howard Webb's admitting that was wrong. There's just so many of these incidents at the moment that I think it's got to the stage where now, come on, let's have this conversation. Okay, nothing might come of it, but it's time to at least sort of start putting a bit more pressure on the PGMOL and the use and the application of VAR, because we're having too many of these conversations, basically.
And that's the thing, we shouldn't be having these conversations, especially when you're looking at that Liverpool Tottenham game was rightly being billed as, by this point in the season, probably the best game in the season. And you think, what a bloody shame.
11v10, and even 11v10, I think it was one of the best games of the season. It was 11v11. It was stacking up to be a terrific game. 11v10, it was a pretty good game. 11v9, okay, yeah, it's going to be a certain type of a game. It was thrilling still. You're sort of, you were willing Liverpool on to hang on. I think even people who weren't of a Liverpool persuasion, I think they would have sort of half wanted Liverpool to see that out, because it was such a backs to the wall, effort. Yeah, you're right. And we've got a game there just taken away. I think that maybe feeds into it a little bit. It's the game of the weekend. It's the 5:30 Sky Tottenham Liverpool sort of, real publicity behind it. Maybe that's the time to do it, rather than, with the greatest respect, Sheffield United v Burnley on a 3:00 Saturday, when it isn't sort of in the public eye as much. Maybe this is the sort of the way to go about trying to implement these kind of changes, or force these kind of conversations.
And you think, what a shame for the fans that have travelled down to London to watch the game, and then you think,
and they were brilliant. And they were brilliant, by the way, as well. I mean, you saw the scenes at the end, and you talk about siege mentality and Darwin Núñez and the likes, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. You saw him whipping up the crowd in the corner when he won a throw-in, didn't he? And they know, the fans who travel down know how much Liverpool gave there. The Liverpool players know how much their fans are behind them at the moment. I think that's we've talked all about the officials. I think that's the big takeaway for me, is that this is a team that's going in the right direction, and it's got a group of fans that actually believes in the direction it's going in as well.
Yeah, I think that's the main positive we can take from this. Everyone is heading in the exactly right direction. This has almost galvanised Liverpool even more, which, you know, hopefully in the long run, you think that will have a really sort of positive effect on the season. I mean, we're back to Europe again this Thursday, so hopefully another positive result there. Opportunities for players who maybe haven't got that many opportunities this season. We'd certainly expect to see like Gravenberch, etc., Watira, Endo. So we'll be looking forward to that. But Neil, it's been an
Yeah.
absolute pleasure discussing the game, and you hopefully will be have
Sorry.
less of these issues to discuss with you in 2 weeks'
Yeah.
time.
Just before we go, mate. Sorry, I just wanted to mention the women's team and an unbelievable result for them on Sunday in the WSL opener at Arsenal. I mean, one good result in North London this weekend for Liverpool with that. Fantastic. I mean, they had their own issues this week with COVID and injuries, and I think they only named 4 substitutes for the game. 54,000 fans inside the Emirates, and Liverpool have beaten one of the title favourites in Arsenal. So brilliant work from Matt Beard and the girls there. That's an unbelievable result, and only adds into the sort of feel-good factor around the club at the moment, doesn't it? The under-21s won on Sunday as well, won at Crystal Palace. Things are in decent health at Liverpool at the moment, even if they're not getting the rub of the green from match officials.
We'll get there eventually. It's very, very good side actually. That Arsenal women's side as well. A bit to see them. Very, very good standard of football. So superb opener to the season. Hopefully a sign of things to come. Neil, been a pleasure having you here as ever, and I'm sure, as everyone knows, you can all catch your work on covering Liverpool at neilj.substack.com, and of course on your Twitter at Neil Jones Goal. Likewise, we have our own bits and bobs on Substack, including this lovely chat with Neil on empirethecop.substack.com. You can catch it on our YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Farrell Keeling and the lovely Neil Jones. Thank you for watching and take care.